Abraham's wife, Sarah, thought herself too advanced in age to bear a child, so she encouraged Abraham to have a child with her handmaiden Hagar so that Abraham's name could be carried forward. But later on, the Lord did bless Abraham and Sarah with a son. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. The day Isaac was weaned, Abraham threw a big feast. But at the feast, Abraham's wife, Sarah, saw Ishmael, the son of her handmaiden, mocking Isaac. So she told Abraham to throw the bondwoman out and Ishmael, because she wasn't going to have Ishmael being heir with her son Isaac. Now this grieved Abraham because he felt responsible for both boys. But God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight. Hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Thus we learn that the covenants that God had with Abraham are passed down through the seed of Isaac. Now Abraham rose early the next morning, took some bread, a bottle of water, and gave it to Hagar, and sent her away with Ishmael. She departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Here's a map of Israel. Here's the approximate location of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And it goes on to say that she stood about a bow shot away because she didn't want to watch a child suffer from thirsting to death as he died. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. Muslims have actually been taught that the well of water referenced in verse 19 above is the well of Zamzam in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. That would mean that between verse 14, when they were sent away, and 15, when their water ran out, Hagar and Ishmael would have had to travel across 1,000 miles of, at that time, uninhabited, unexplored, uncharted desert on a single skin of water, only to arrive at one of the harshest environments that Arabia has to offer. In fact, all of the historians and geographers from several centuries BC and on into the Christian era who wrote about the area where Mecca was eventually built in the 4th century AD described the area as being uninhabitable. Please see the video, History of Mecca, for more on that subject. So we're supposed to believe that Ishmael and Hagar traveled 1,000 miles from Beersheba to Mecca on a single skin of water before they filled it at the well. Here's a sample Islamic site. Abraham took Hagar and her son Ishmael to a place near the Kaaba. He left them under a tree at the site of Zamzam. No one lived in Mecca back then, yet Abraham made them sit there, leaving them with some dates and a small water skin. Thereafter he set out towards home. So then apparently Abraham, Hagar, and Ishmael walked across 1,000 miles of unknown desert. Abraham dropped them off under a tree in what eventually became Mecca. And then Abraham set out on his 1,000-mile walk back home. Does anything seem a bit peculiar about that picture? Well, what we know from Scripture is that Ishmael dwelt in the wilderness of Paran. Now here's the Sinai Peninsula. Here's the wilderness of Paran over here in what today is Saudi Arabia. And here's Mount Sinai. Let's look at this Gulf of Aqaba in the large scale here. Here's that Gulf of Aqaba. Here's the wilderness of Paran. And here's Mount Sinai. And here's Mecca, down here, 1,000 kilometers from the wilderness of Paran. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So they dwelt here in Paran, and she went over to Egypt and got him a wife. Are we to believe that Hagar traveled back the 1,000 miles through the desert from Mecca to Egypt and then back again with Ishmael's wife? Was this a trip she made? From Mecca all the way up to Egypt and all the way back to Mecca with Ishmael's wife? Of course not. Of course, that's not the case because the historical and scriptural evidence suggests that the 12 tribes had developed from Ishmael's sons and inhabited the northern Sinai Peninsula, the wilderness of Paran, and surrounding area. We also know Ishmael wasn't very far because he was available to attend his father Abraham's funeral near Hebron. So here's the wilderness of Paran and here's Hebron. So that's where Ishmael had to go to his father's funeral. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah. Now, are we to believe that Ishmael traveled from Mecca 1,000 miles to Hebron for his father's funeral? Amazingly, in order to resolve the preposterous suggestion that Abraham or Ishmael were ever at the place where Mecca was eventually built in the 4th century, 1,000 miles from where they actually lived, the most quoted 8th century Islamic tradition creator, Ibn Ishaq, originated the idea that Abraham commuted back and forth to visit Ishmael in Mecca on the winged camel, or Buraq. He also invoked this mythical animal to explain how Ishmael was able to attend Abraham's funeral 1,000 miles from Mecca. In the Zoroastrian scriptures, that the fabled winged camel was used by their mythical prophet to travel to and from the place where their immortal ancestors were supposed to have dwelt. Muhammad also credited a similar creature for transporting him on an overnight journey covering the 1,000 miles to Jerusalem and then to heaven and back to Mecca by morning. Please visit the Muhammad's Night Journey video for more on that extremely important subject in Islam. The biggest reason we know that neither Abraham nor Ishmael visited Mecca is because Mecca did not exist before immigrants from Yemen built it in the 4th century AD and built their Kaaba for Arabian star family worship in the early 5th century, of which their moon god stone idol Muslims still bow toward today. Please see the history of Mecca and Mecca the Kaaba and the Black Stone videos. To our Muslim friends, will you continue to reject the 1,600-year record of God to mankind that we can see from the above as a perfect geographical and historical fit? Or will you continue to follow Muhammad's standalone Antichrist 7th century religion and the flying camels of Islam's 7th and 8th century fiction? Are rehashed fables and jinn worship really what you want to bet your eternal destiny on? Have you ever even read the Bible? Please join us in the Islam Christian Forum at the top link to the right or below this video to discuss this subject and many others. The second link for the text version of the subject in a printable PDF. Third link for an introduction to the gospel. Fourth link for papers on this and many other subjects by Dr. Rafat Amari, from which much of the material for this video was taken. I would suggest that any Muslim that dares to read Dr. Amari's extremely well-researched and heavily footnoted book, Islam in Light of History, will be able to overcome Muhammad's standalone 7th century religion. Please visit brotherpete.com for much more.